I said, forget about it. Don't worry about it. And I just walked away. Thought it was funny. I just thought it was funny. I don't want to watch that guy. Boy, she got apologetic. I thought it was funny. I couldn't bust out laughing, but at least she was honest, wasn't she? That's funny. People can be funny, especially when they write. I had a guy call and he said, I'm a Bible scholar, and Matthew wasn't written until 300 years after the death of Jesus, and you need to stop that stuff you're talking about. And I thought, Matthew was written 300 years after Jesus. All the Gospels written in the first century. I thought, what a knucklehead. I'm a Bible scholar. Well, you know what you say when somebody says something like that? Thank you very much. You can't argue with somebody that's got concrete for a head, can you? Golly. What a lame brain. I can't believe those guys. I've got people calling me and instructing me all the time. You can't believe. I've spent 58 years studying the Bible. I know I don't look 58 years old now since I lost my belly. I told Gerald I was looking just like him. I didn't mean I was losing my hair. I'm getting a flat belly. People are so funny. They just call and tell me the dumbest things, like they think it's going to affect me. You need to quit preaching. Okay, I'll tell everybody Sunday morning I'll quit preaching. I think those people have got something loose in their brain or something. Are we ready, Mike? It's Sunday morning, and our subject is prophecy, and we're working our way through prophecy. Prophecy is about the Old Testament. Without understanding, unless you understand the timeline of Israel from 1 Samuel through 2 Chronicles, you're not going to understand prophecy. This is the time period that Israel was a kingdom under kings. Kingdom under kings. And all the kings of Israel began with Saul and goes through Zedekiah. This is the kings right here. Most of you know this. I'm only saying this for people who don't know. This is all the kings of Israel. Saul, then David, then Solomon. Then the kingdom is split into two nations because of Solomon's apostasy in the 11th chapter of 1 Kings. Splits into two nations. Rehoboam is the king. This is the lineage of Judah. David is of Judah. Solomon is David's son of Judah. And then Rehoboam is Solomon's son. Abijah is Rehoboam's son. Asa is Abijah's son. And all the way down, other than Athaliah, and she is the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, and she tries to take over the kingdom of, I won't go through her story. Gosh, that's a long story. But they kill her, and then we resume under Joash all the way down to Zedekiah. And Israel is carried away into captivity because they go after all the sun and tree goddesses. And those gods and goddesses are all the male deities are the sun god. They go after Baal in the grove, and Shemash and Molech. And the tree goddesses are the grove, and Venus and Aphrodite and Diana and so forth. They go after all this. This is the same system that was brought into church by Constantine in 325 A.D. and renamed the Christ Mass. And Christ's Mass is Roman Catholicism, and they dropped one of the S's and put the two words together and called it Christmas. That's totally paganism. It has nothing to do with Jesus. Jesus was God in the flesh. He died to save sinners. But the Christ Mass is pagan. It was against the law to celebrate Christmas 300 years ago in America. whether people like it or not. God scatters Israel. Northern Israel he scatters by the Assyrians in 722 B.C. He scatters southern Judah in 586 B.C., takes them over to Babylon. Takes them to Babylon. And when they are in Babylon, Babylon is overthrown by the Persian Mede Empire. Persian Mede, that's Cyrus comes in and overthrows. Nebuchadnezzar is the king of Babylon when he overthrows Israel. Well, the Persians under Cyrus overthrow Babylon, and then Persians are ruling for some years, and then the Persians are overthrown by the Grecian Empire, by Greece, and that is ruled by Alexander the Great. And under the Grecian Empire, all because Israel went after all this, we're talking about what the scattering of Israel brought about, how that it brings about certain things. When they were scattered, it brought out the 70 weeks of Daniel. I'm not going through that right now, but I will be going through that in this series. When I get into the 70 weeks of Daniel, we'll see that we're close to the end of time. Now, Israel was scattered. Babylon is overthrown by Persia, Persia by Greece. When Alexander the Great, this is around 332 B.C., Alexander the Great, Alex the Great overthrows. The Persians overthrow Babylon in 539 B.C., and Babylon overthrows the Assyrians in approximately 612. There's some debate on that, exactly when it happened. But when you get to Greece, Alexander the Great, this is the beast world system. The beast is not a man, it's a world system. I've spent over 50 years studying on the beast. And the beast is the Babylonian lion, the most regal of all animals, the Persian bear, the largest carnivore in the world, and the largest armies. That's why they're called the bear. They just literally rampage, run roughshod over other empires. And then the great fighting machine was the leopard, of probably the most temperate killer in the jungle. The one animal that when he comes after you, if he comes after you, he's coming to eat. He comes at night, and he's going to eat you. And if he kills you, if he comes after you, you're going to die. Well, that was why Alexander the Great was compared with a leopard. He was a killing machine. His armies wasn't as big as the Persians, but he knew how tactically to fight them, to overcome them. Then the Romans. This is the beast with iron teeth. Iron teeth. And this is all found in 2 chapters, well, actually more chapters, but they're named this way in Daniel, the 7th chapter, and in Revelation, the 13th chapter. You'll see the lion, the bear, and the leopard. And Rome was ruling during the days of Jesus. During the days of Jesus, well, the Romans were very barbaric. They had the Colosseum and the circuses, and you see that Colosseum over there. They were feeding the Christians to the gladiators and to the lions and to the bears and so forth. And Rome didn't have much culture, so Rome held on to the culture of the Greeks. Whenever you're talking about Grecian culturalization of the world, you're talking about teaching people the languages, the philosophies of Aristotle and of Plato. And you say, why would you mention those things in a Bible teaching? Because Paul said, I became a Greek to the Greek, or as a Greek to the Greek. I became as a Jew to the Jew. For I am become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. What he was doing, he used the philosophies of the people of the day and used some of their terminology to bring it into the church so they could understand. And I don't have time to go into all that, Epicureanism and Stoicism, or some of their sayings and so forth. What we're talking about is the languages that Alexander the Great gave to the world. He gave the world an international language of what they call Koine, or common street language. In every city-state, wherever a city ruled to, within a state. In that state, they had a different common street language of the Greek, and that was called a dialectos, dialektos. Dialectos, it's our word dialect. And those dialects would differ as much as two foreign languages in our day and time. They would differ as much as Spanish and Italian. And he also gave the world, Alexander the Great, gave them their glossa, and the glossa were foreign languages. Our word glossary comes from the word glossa, foreign languages. And our word glossary, R-Y, put an R-Y on a glossa, and that's a section of a book with words that are foreign. So whenever you get into Acts 2, when they all spoke with other tongues, another thing that developed besides the 70 weeks of Daniel from the scattering of Israel was the tongues or the foreign languages and the dialects that Alexander the Great gave to the world. Now the Romans had the Latin language, and they were speaking some Latin, but they had many other languages throughout the world, and all of those together were called glossa, or foreign languages. Now, in Acts 2, we've already gone through this. There's two main chapters in the Bible, 1 Corinthians 14 and Acts 2, that are the highlight chapters for tongues. And the only reason they said tongues was because this was during King James' reign. The King James Bible was translated in 1611. Now, when it was translated in England, when they would be traveling around, some guy would be upon a white steed, and he'd be on his horse, and he'd have a sword, and he might be a knight, and he'd be riding along the road, and he'd see a young man out there, and he'd say, "Forsooth, a young knave, what tongue dost thou speak?" He didn't mean, I've said this before, he didn't mean for a soothing time in the Navy speak in tongues. That's what some people would translate that. Young knave, a knave was a young man. Forsooth meant of truth, young man. What language are you speaking? That's what it meant. That's the only reason you have the word tongue in the Bible. Is because that was the term used under King James' time. King James. They didn't go around in the first century saying thee, thou, and thy. They didn't do that. I've been around people and they try to sound real spiritual, so they'll write me letters and say thee and thou, and they'll start trying to sound real flowery like they're writing some novel for some movie company in Hollywood or something. They're trying to sound religious. Now, you got the two words, dialectos, and Pentecostal tongues is not true. It's an absolute lie. I don't apologize for that. I have no qualms about saying that. I've traveled in Pentecostal churches when I was a young gospel singer in the 60s, and I saw all this jibber-jabbering and carrying on, and many of you here spoke in tongues before you came here and realized that it was your vain imagination is what it is. You have the word dialectos, and you have the word glossa. And you have the word heteroglossa. Heteroglossa, and hetero is a Greek word. A heterosexual is other sex. Heteroglossa is other foreign languages. When they said, "How hear we every man in our own tongue," they said, "How hear we every man in our own dialect wherein we were born." Now, what does that mean? Well, the Jews over here, when they were a nation and they were 40 years in the wilderness, 40 years before they come back into the land. And when they come back into the land, they're 300 years under judges. 40 years prior to that, they were in the wilderness, and 400 years in Egypt prior to that. And prior to Egyptian bondage, there was Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, and Jacob's name was changed to Israel, and he had 12 sons that became the nation. They had, and when Moses went up on the mountain, God says, I've got 3 feasts that all the males are required to come back to: Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Ingathering. Which was also the Feast of Tabernacles, the Feast of Huts, and it was all coupled with the Day of Atonement. And the Passover was in our month, March, April, and the ingathering and the Day of Atonement was in September, October, and this is their ecclesiastical year. All the males had to come back to here, but they had been scattered all over the earth because they kept going after these gods, and as they're scattered, they're all coming back to Jerusalem, and after 500 years being in captivity, they're coming back to Jerusalem from all over the world. These are Jews from every nation under heaven speaking all these dialects and all these glossa. Now, they said, how hear we ever man in our own dialect of the common street language, key words, wherein we were born. The Ethiopians are hearing in the Ethiopian language. The Mesopotamian people are hearing in the Mesopotamian dialect of the Greek. Even Israel had a Hebrew dialect of the Greek Koine. When they spoke in the Hebrew dialect, they were preaching or they were talking in Greek, the Greek dialect of Israel. Israel had a Greek dialect as well as a Hebrew language. When Paul would stand up and say, I spoke in the Hebrew dialect, or it says Hebrew tongue, it doesn't mean Hebrew language. Now, we're talking about what are these tongues. It's not that jibber-jabber that's going on in the Pentecostal church. I keep saying this. You leave the definition of a word, you leave the truth. You can't leave definition. People can say, well, I know what I feel, and I know what I believe, and your feelings will lie to you just like a little 16-year-old girl in a rock concert. Her feelings are lying to her. She thinks she's in love with that guy on the stage, and she don't know she's not. She's just excited. If you'll turn yourself over to an adrenaline rush, everything the Pentecostals are saying is not true. Everything the Baptists are saying is not true. There's no accept Christ. There's no sinner's prayer. There's believe, but there's not accept Christ. You can't accept Christ when you're dead in sin. The Bible says so. You can't pray a prayer to a God you don't believe in. Don't have time to go into that. Now what we're trying to do is getting the thing straight. Tongues were confused in Genesis 11. Genesis 11:4, they said, let us build us a city and a tower. Let us make us a name. Let us make us a name. Name is the word Shem. It means an authority. Shem is also the second-born son of Noah who received the blessing of God. When they say that, they're saying, let us make up our own doctrine. When man does that, God says, I'll confuse tongues, and then I'll scatter you abroad over the earth. God scattered Israel abroad. He gave them a confusion of understanding, and this is what's going on. If you'll notice in Acts 2, God unconfused the languages when righteousness came, didn't he? When righteousness comes in your life, anybody that says, well, everybody's got an opinion. No, everybody's got an opinion, but opinions don't count. I've had people say, well, predestination is a very confusing doctrine. No, it's not. It has a definition. The word is pro-horizo. It means to pre-bound, pro-horizo. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate. I don't believe in predestination. You're an ignorant person too, because the Bible teaches it. God also did predestinate. Pro-horizo is the original word. Forget predestinate. That's an English word. The New Testament text was written in Greek. Pro-horizo means to predetermine beforehand. The horizo, that's our word horizon, it means to predetermine for the light or the boundary of light. And God has a family that He's predetermined for the boundary of light. The dialects and glossa was to get that message out to the Gentile world. Let me remind you, Jesus tells 12 ignorant northern Galilean apostles. They're ignorant. What do you mean ignorant? Stupid? No. They were raised in northern Galilee. The 11 were raised in northern Galilee. Judas was raised in southern Judah. Judas' father was a Pharisee. Judas was a Pharisee by inheritance. You had to inherit your father's office. Judas was the only Pharisee that was one of the apostles. It's amazing, isn't it? The 11 were fishermen. If this is Israel, and here's Galilee, and here's the Jordan River, here's the Dead Sea, and here's the Mediterranean Sea, and here's Egypt over here, Egypt. The apostles lived up here. Peter and John fished in that Sea of Galilee. Southern Judah down here, this is where the Pharisees were. This is where Jerusalem was, and the temple and the synagogues. So you got these ignorant northern Galilean fishermen and farmers and shepherds, and Jesus tells them, and they know one, maybe two dialects, maybe some of them. Peter evidently knew the dialect of southern Judah, because you remember when he was standing around the fire there in the 22nd chapter of Luke, and he's warming his hands by the fire by the enemy while they had taken Jesus, and a woman comes up and says, "You're not from here. Your speech betrayeth you. You're from somewhere else." She could tell by his dialect he wasn't from southern Judah. He was from northern Galilee. So Jesus comes to these apostles and tells them, and they speak one, maybe two dialects of the Koine. Maybe one of them might know one over here, or might know a Moab or an Ammonite dialect. They might know that. But Jesus tells these disciples, "Go into all the world and teach all nations." And they're going, "How do you expect us to do that? How can we do that?" They couldn't if they hadn't had a special gift. And in that second chapter of Acts, they were speaking with heteroglossa, with other foreign languages, and the people were hearing in their dialect of the nation where they were born. This is a miracle of the ear, but it's in a sense a miracle of the mouth, because they were speaking with glossa, and there was a division of languages there. When it says cloven tongues, like as a fire, all the Pentecostals, you say, "Jim, are you after Pentecostals?" Let me tell you, if people are preaching false doctrine, I'm after them. The Baptists are preaching false doctrine. The Methodists are preaching false. I don't know of anybody, we're in the apostasy. I don't know of anybody that studies. There's a few that's on the border, and I'm not talking about Billy Graham. John MacArthur's on the border, but he does a lot of compromising. They just don't care. Cloven is the word diamorizo. Diamorizo means to petition off. It doesn't mean this thing here, some red tongue of fire. No, that's not what it's talking about. Diamorizo means to petition off. Here's the Ethiopian, here's the Mesopotamian, here's the Athenian, and these apostles are preaching, and they're hearing, all these men are hearing out here in their own dialect when they were born. They're standing out there listening, hearing. And they're going to go back to the nations where they came from, because remember, they had to be here for these feasts, and they're going to go back. This is pouring out of God's Spirit on all flesh. The Holy Spirit is truth, equals truth. John 14, 15, 16, John 15, 26, John 16, 13, 1 John 5 and 6. The Spirit is the truth. So the truth is going to be poured out on all flesh, whereas it was only poured out on one flesh, the Jewish flesh, in the Old Testament. Now God's blinded the Jews, and He's going to call the New Testament church spiritual Israel, and he's going to give red, yellow, white, black, brown flesh, all the truth. And that's the all flesh, not every individual, but an elect family out of all these people. Now, I'm trying to explain to you, I want you to understand, why do you dwell on this so much? I traveled as a gospel singer. The Pentecostals support gospel music. 80% of all support of gospel singers when they travel all over the country and go in and out of these churches. 75 to 80% of all the churches that support these singers are Pentecostal. It could be 90%. And I went in and out of those churches, and I saw the biggest bunch of foolishness when I was a young singer back in the 60s, 63, 64, 65, up to about 70. And I saw the biggest bunch of foolishness I've ever seen in my life. That's what has provoked me to study this to such a great degree. Now, what I want us to do is go back and look at 1 Corinthians 14. I've gone through this Acts 2. If you want the full picture of Acts 2, all I did was give you a quick rundown where we are with this picture of tongues. I want you to see what's going on in 1 Corinthians 14. 1 Corinthians 14, let me just say this before I get into 1 Corinthians 14. Acts 2 and 1 Corinthians 14, these are the two chapters that people want to know the answers. You're going to have a little bit about tongues in Acts 19, a little bit in Acts 13, and a little bit in 1 Corinthians 13. You're going to have a little bit here and a couple other places. But the main thing people want to know, what's going on in Acts 2? Is that a Pentecostal thing? No. It's Pentecost. I don't like Pentecostalism. We got a lot of people here that were Pentecostals before you came, don't we? Now, what's going on in Acts 2, you've got the word glossa and heteroglossa, other foreign languages, and you have the word dialectos. Then you have, over in 1 Corinthians 14, you have the word glossa, and that's it. You don't have the word dialectos over here. What's happening at Corinth is not the same thing that's happening in Acts 2. What's happening in Acts 2 is how Jesus is going to get the apostles to take the message of the gospel throughout the world to the all flesh. They're going to leave Jerusalem. They're going to go back to their respective countries where they were raised, and they were there because they were scattered there. Once you move away from your home, you stay away for hundreds of years, then where you move to is going to be home. So you've got Jews over here in Greece. You got Jews up here in, this is an old map, says USSR, but you got Jews up here in Armenia, or what used to be Georgia. You got Jews up here in Russia. That's why the Jews in 1948, when Israel was declared a nation for the first time in 2,600 years, that's why they started coming back down to Israel from Russia, because you had a bunch of them up there. In fact, there's a little town up here in Georgia named Jericho. Where do you think they got the name? Because some Jews, when they were carried away by the Assyrians, and the headquarters of the Assyrian Empire was up here in upper part of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia means between the rivers, between the Tigris and the Euphrates. Iraq is Babylon, Iran is Persia, and upper Mesopotamia is up here in the Caucasus Mountains, between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. This up here was where that goes right into Russia, goes straight up to Moscow. So when you had Russian Jews coming back from the captivity, that's because they were carried up there by the Assyrians, and they migrated on further up in there over the thousands of years. Now what I want us to do, I want to show you what 1 Corinthians 14 is about. When you look at 1 Corinthians 14, I've got so much more to say on this, if y'all will bear with me. 1 Corinthians, the 14th chapter, when you're going to read 1 Corinthians 14, you have to look back at 13 and 12 and 11, but I can't look at all of that. Whenever you're looking at 1 Corinthians 12, the Bible is talking about the gifts of the Spirit. Gifts of Spirit. Well, everybody doesn't have all the gifts. The apostles had special gifts. 2 Corinthians 12:12. 12:12. The Bible speaks of the gifts of an apostle. Now, when you hear these men call themselves apostles, they're not. An apostle is a direct letter carrier from an authority from a king. Those guys have not gotten an authority directly from the king, but they say they've gotten some visions from God and God's revealing to me. No, he's not. Prophecy ceases when the church matures. So 2 Corinthians 12:12 speaks of the gifts of an apostle. We're going to talk about Mark the 16th chapter. This is where the gifts of an apostle were given, starting there in verse 15. This is where the gifts of an apostle were given. When the church matures and grows up, then all these gifts, tongues, the ability to speak and people hear in their own language. The purpose of that is to be able to preach to the Gentile world. All these people at Pentecost, now Pentecost was every year, but all these people at Pentecost, they're going to go back to their respective nations. These are Jews. They're going to go back and preach to the Gentiles, and God's going to pour out of his truth on the world. Up until this time, in Acts 2, it was forbidden by God for the Jews to give the truth to anyone outside of Israel. All through the Old Testament, God gave his truth to one flesh, and he started with Adam there in Genesis 5, and his son Seth, and his son Enosh, and his son Canaan, and his son Mahalalel, and his son Enoch, and his son Methuselah, and his son Lamech, all the way down to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. This is one flesh, one family. God gave his truth to this flesh. He blinded their eyes because they turned away from him for that 500-year period they were a nation. And he's pouring out of his Spirit in Acts 2 on all flesh. Now you say, how can that be when those are only Jews? The way that it's going to go to all flesh is every one of those Jews are going to go back and preach to the Gentile nations of the world. That's how it's going to all flesh. Now, I want us to read here in, chapter 12. Let me just say this. Chapter 12 tells you, let me just read a little bit of it, just a little bit of 12. And he'll tell us, well, I'm in Romans. That won't work, will it? No, it ain't going to work. All right, chapter 12 of 1 Corinthians. He's talking about the gifts that God gives in chapter 12. All right. Now, and he says here in chapter 12, concerning spiritual gifts, I would not have you ignorant. And he says down here in verse 4, there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. Remember, the Holy Spirit's truth. The Bible says so. Thy word is truth, John 17:17. Now there are diversities of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are diversities of administrations or of attendants, but the same Lord. There are diversities of operations, but it is the same God which worketh all things and all people and all the world, and all the gifts. But the manifestation of the Spirit is given to every man to profit withal. For to one is given by the Spirit, by the truth, by the Word of God, the word of wisdom. One man has wisdom to see things when other people don't have. But let me say to you, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and wisdom increases the older you get. I mean, I'm be 74 next month, and the only reason I've got some wisdom is because of a lifetime of fiery trials and God dealing with me and crushing the life out of me and putting me in every kind of fire you can imagine over these 70-something years. That's the only reason I'm wise now. I wasn't wise when I was 19, 20, 21, 22, 25, 35, 40. Wasn't wise then. God's taught me a lot in these last 10 years. I think passing 60 helps more than anything. Don't you, Gerald? Sometimes you think you know a lot at 55 and you don't. You just don't realize how much you can learn when you pass 60. You start getting humble because you lose all your looks. You know that? You don't look like Elvis no more. I don't think the women want to look like Elvis. Or you don't look like what you thought looked like Elvis when you went to the mirror. Though. Looks kind of like Elvis. No, it doesn't. Now, for the one is given the Spirit, the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge by the same Spirit. Now, Pat Robertson says a word of knowledge is having a crystal ball and going, someone out there's got, that's a word of knowledge, he calls it. Knowledge is the word gnosis, science. It means exactness. Science is something that's exact, not someone out there's got some hurt here somewhere in your abdomen, somehow, something, and you claim this healing. That is foolishness. Pat Robertson is an idiot. I mean, the word of knowledge is by the truth. And the word of God is truth. So this is a word of knowledge by the word of God. They don't define anything. Then he goes on down here and talks about wisdom and knowledge. And they were all baptized into one body. We're baptized into the body of Christ by blood baptism. And we're all members in particular. He says God has placed every man in the body as it pleased him. There in verse 18. And then on down here, now you are, in verse 27, now you are the body of Christ. There's one body. Take, eat, this is my body. Partake of the body, partake of the church. Not take of bread and crackers and grape juice. And God has set some in the church, first apostles. Is everybody an apostle? No. You have to have those gifts to speak with glossa and people will hear in their dialect. You have to be able to be bitten by a king cobra and not affect you. You have to be able to touch somebody and heal them and not scream out real loud, be healed. That's not it. Paul could touch somebody and they'd be healed. But God knew who to tell him to touch. And Paul knew who to touch. And God has set some in the church, first apostles, secondary prophets, thirdly, teachers after their miracles, then gifts of healings. Paul could heal people. The apostles could do that. Can men do that today? No. Paul was losing that ability when he was in jail at Rome, when he wrote the book of Philippians, one of his last epistles. It was a prison epistle. He said, Epaphroditus, who came to see me, he was sick nigh to death. Why didn't Paul reach out and touch him and heal him? His ability to heal, the gifts of an apostle were beginning to wane upon the apostles at that time. He couldn't heal people anymore. But there was a time he could. Peter could raise the dead at one point. That was the gift of an apostle. He raised Dorcas, didn't he? The Bible said she was dead. Helps, governments, diversities, genos. Diversities of glossa. Diversity, genos, comes from the word gene or genesis or nativity. It means kindred. Being able to speak in a glossa and people understand. That was the gift of the apostles, and that has gone. Tongues shall cease, the next chapter says. And then he says, I want you to notice this. Are all apostles? No. That's calling for a negative. No. Are all prophets? No. Are all teachers? Absolutely not. You have to have the aptitude of teaching. Are all workers of miracles? Nope. That's not true. Have all the gifts of healing? Do all speak with glossa? Do all interpret? Deramuneo, explain thoroughly? That's what the word means. Now notice what he says. But covet earnestly, zelao is the word covet. We get our word zeal from that. It means to be hated. It can be hated either good or bad. In anger or in what is positive for the church. And yet show I unto you a more excellent hyperbole way. By the way, the word way is hodos. I'll show you a hyperbole, hyperbole hodos. We know that there is a narrow way and a broad way. Way is the word hodos, and Jesus says, I am the way. So there is a narrow way, a broad way, and narrow is the word thalibo, and it comes from the base word thalipsis, and that is the common Greek word tribulation. So he's going to tell you what the tribulation way is, and that leads you directly to chapter 13. 1 Corinthians 13 is, he says, I'm going to show you a more excellent hodos. I'm going to show you the more excellent way. And here it is, charity. That's the next chapter. He's leading into chapter 13. When you see 12, that's not in the text. 13, that's not in the text. If you see 13 and 1, 1 is not in the text, and 13 is not in the text. These were scrolls that they rolled up. They'd unroll them and read them. There was no chapter and verse. Sometimes I'm not even looking at the chapter and verse. I don't even care about what chapter and verse it is. I know where it is on the page in my Bible, and I don't try to remember chapter 3, verse 4. Usually when people are doing that, sometimes I'll know it. Sometimes I'll know it's right here in the middle of the chapter. I'll know it's 3, 4, 5 verses from the first part of the chapter. If you're studying chapter and verse, you're probably not paying as much attention to the text. You understand what I'm saying? All right. So, what he's doing, here he is in chapter 12. He says, let me show you a more excellent way, chapter 13. And what is chapter 13 about? Charity. Charity is the word agape. And you got those two words that have been translated out of the Greek text. This is why you can't trust the English Bible. Good night. And people will write to me, well, the English Bible is the inspired word of God. No, it's not. You can't. English is a harlot language. You can get the truth out of an English Bible to a degree, but you can't get definitive and get all the definition out of it. Now, the excellent way, or more excellent way, hyperbole, the more excellent way is pointing to chapter 13, agape, or charity. You have two words translated to the word love or charity. You have the word agape, and you have the word agapao, the verb form, and the word charity. The word charity translated, charity is translated from agape, love is translated from agape, but you also have the word phileo, translated to L-O-V-E. Now, charity and agape are the same thing. I don't know why would the translators do that? I don't have any idea why they did it. But they're the same word. And we know that agape, 2 John 6, the best definition for agape in the Bible or in the world, 2 John 6, this is love. And you can substitute agape, or this is charity, that we walk after his commandments. You know what that last verse of chapter 12 is saying? The more excellent way is being obedient to God. That's what he's saying. When he gets down to, and he says in verse 1, chapter 13, though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels. What does he mean by that? And have not charity. If I'm not walking in the commandments of God, when I'm speaking with the tongues of men and angels. And people will call me and ask me, what does that mean, speaking with the tongues of angels? Do angels talk? And they've heard me preach 500 times what an angel is. Do you know sometimes people will call me and totally forget what an angel is? That comes to grace and truth. Some of you have done that. Jim, what does this mean to speak with the tongues of an angel? Do angels speak with up in the heavens and up in the sky, speak with different tongues than we do? Angel, what's the meaning of the word? Angelos. The common Greek word messenger. It could be Michael or Gabriel the archangel, but it can be me. All the pastors of the churches were called messengers, angels. The seven spirits of the seven angels of the seven churches. The last verse of Revelation, the first chapter. So if I speak with the glossa of men, and I'm preaching the message of God, and I'm not walking in the commandments of God, then I am making a noise. I'm becoming a sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. You can't take this word tongue and say, aha, see, tongue, glossa of angels. Do they talk different than us? Well, you are an angel if you preach the word of God. You're actually an angel if you go next door and ask the woman, could we borrow a cup of sugar? That's a messenger, isn't it? We got to get out of our minds, angels are some heavenly beings. The word angel merely means messenger. That's it. So what are you going to do with that? Make it some heavenly being now from now on every time? It's kind of like baptize. As soon as John the Baptist says, I baptize with water, and there comes one after me, he'll baptize you with the Holy Ghost and fire. And then Jesus goes through his life, and you end up at the end of his life. He resurrects from the dead, goes to his apostles, says, go into all the world and teach all nations. Remember that baptism of John's? Go baptize with his baptism. Remember my baptism? Forget mine. Yeah. That doesn't even make sense, does it? That's like people forget what an angel is when they're talking to me. They'll call me and ask me that. I'm going, what's the definition of an angel? Oh, yeah, that's right, Jim. Messenger. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm just saying, think original text. Now, so he says, here's the more excellent way. The more excellent way is charity. But let me just point out something to you one more time. When did the tongue cease? Go down here in verse 8. Charity never faileth. Walking in the commandments of God never fails. And that's more excellent than all these gifts back here in the previous chapter, isn't it? So, what he's saying, notice you're right in the middle of an agape chapter, right? You're right in the middle of an agape chapter. Charity never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. He's saying, the time will come where there will be no more prophecy to the Word of God because it will be complete in the form of our Bibles, the Textus Receptus. It'll be complete in that. And there'll be no more need for tongues. We got this written in every tongue of the world, including Swahili. We got it in every language of the world. And then he says, there's not going to be any more adding knowledge. Let me ask you this. These people that stand up in these Pentecostal churches, they say, I have a word of prophecy. Mandala shandala shandai kandai shandala matshalo shua kalakamaha. Well, let me ask you, is that prophecy equal to the Word of God? Would that be prophecy inferior or prophecy superior? Or would it be no prophecy at all? If it's prophecy at all, somebody needs to be writing it down and passing it out to the world. But you better not do that, because if you add or take away from the Word of God, it'll be taken away from you. So it's not prophecy. Prophecy will cease. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when that which is perfect is come, when the perfect comes, when the teleos comes, I want you to notice this. When the teleos, the mature church, when the complete believer, let me say something to you here. Do you know there's been more arguments among the so-called scholars about the perfect than just about anything in the Bible? Well, I think tongues are still here because the perfect isn't here yet. Peter says that the perfect, and Paul says in Colossians that the perfect is agape. Isn't this the agape chapter? Everybody looks all over this chapter and all around the Bible looking for the perfect, and God stuck this right in the middle of the perfect chapter. You understand what I'm saying? He stuck that word, that phrase, when the perfect is come, and that which is in part will be done away. Let me just show you one more time in Colossians. Notice, he says, I want to show you a more excellent way, which is the perfect, which is agape. That's what he's saying. It's more excellent. Look here in Colossians. Colossians 3. He's talking about what we're supposed to add to our lives in verses 11, 12, and 13. And look at 14. Above all these things, put on agape, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. Teleates. This bond, this syndesmos, ligament, the thing that joins us together is the ligament of agape. That is the perfect that's going to make the body of Christ walk in His commandments. He's saying the perfect is set. He put that phrase, when the perfect is come, right in the middle of the chapter of the perfect. Do you understand what I'm saying? Yep. Right in center of the chapter of the perfect. And preachers are running all over. Where's the perfect? Doctors of theology. Where's the perfect? He says over here in 1 John, 4th chapter, 1 John 4, in 1 John 4, in verse 17, herein is agape, walking in the commandments of God, charity made perfect, teleos. Here's where the perfect is, that we may have, love is made perfect. Walking in God's commandments is made teleos. The love, or the agape, is the perfect. John's telling us that. Paul told us that we may have boldness in the day of judgment, because as He is, so are we in this world. There is no fear in agape or in charity, which is walking in the commandments of God. No fear of men, but perfect teleos, when the perfect is come, teleos, love. It says the perfect is agape, right there, doesn't it? But teleos agape. That's what it says in the original text. Perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in agape. Teleos in agape. All right. And he goes on and talks about the perfect being all through here. Now let's go back to 1 Corinthians 14. So, can you see that? Well, let me just say one more thing. In 1 Corinthians 12, Excuse me, 1 Corinthians 13. Let me show you this one more time. So if he's talking about the perfect being complete and growing up and being mature as a church, that's when you begin to walk in his commandments, and that's agape, or that's charity. That's charity. Then he says, right after he says, when the perfect is come, or the mature church is come, look here in chapter 13, look here what he says. Verse 11, when I was a child. What does that have to do with the perfect? The church is a baby church here. That's what he's talking about. The church has got infant gifts, and they need all of those special abilities to heal, to prove who they are out there in the world, because we don't have the Bible written yet. We don't have the New Testament. It's in the making. And they have to prove who they are through all these miracles. And they'll only prove it to the believers. Then he says, when I was a child, I spake as a child. When the church is a child, when it's an infant, it will speak as an infant and use these infant gifts. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. When I grew up and became perfect or mature, then the infant gifts of the tongues won't be necessary anymore, will they? And we have the Bible written in all the languages of the world, like I said a while ago. There is absolutely no need for the tongues of the first century. And it was nothing to do with the Pentecostal tongues of a Pentecostal church. Nothing. Now, I was a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. And that's a reference back to when the perfect is come, then these things that we see in part will be done away with. Do you see that? Yeah. That's not even hard, is it? No. And what's amazing, he sticks this phrase, when the perfect has come, right in the middle of the perfect chapter. Doesn't he? Stuck it right in the middle of the charity chapter, which is walking in the commandments of God. Now, let's go to chapter 14. Follow after agape, walking in the commandments of God. Verse 1. Notice he's going to show him a more excellent way, the last verse of chapter 12. And then he talks about charity, and when the church grows up, all these infant gifts will be gone, because charity is the thing. Walking in God's commandments is the thing. Walking in his commandments is not just being able to memorize Greek words and say them. Look at chapter 8, verse 1 of this book. Look here. Chapter 8, verse 1. Now, as touching things offered to idols, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but charity edifies. He says, having gnosis, just having knowledge, exact science. That's our word, science. Just having Greek words, just having history, timelines, and being able to spew it out of your mouth doesn't mean a thing if you're not walking in agape. He's saying having knowledge, he says, doesn't do any good. This is just having the knowledge of things. He said that puffs up. P-S-U-C-H-I-O. Phusiao. Phusiao means to inflate or cause one to be conceited. Having knowledge without walking in it. And he says charity edifies. Charity, walking in the commandments of God, edifies. Edify, O-I-K-O-D-O-M-E-O. Domeo is the word roof. It's our word dome, but it's roof. And oikos means house. It builds up the house of God, and we are God's house, aren't we? When they put the roof on, they said the house was finished. That builds up the house of God, and Christ is the son of his own house. Whose house are we? So what builds up the house of God is charity. What is charity? It's walking the commandments. You have to know it and do it. Knowing it is not good enough and spewing it out of your mouth if you're not doing it. You're wasting your time if you're just spewing out Greek words without living righteously. Don't just say what and don't go try to beat people up. When any of y'all that's been with me, when I'm out in public, I witness to people. I teach them. I'll give them a Greek word. I'll say, well, let me tell you about that. I don't jump on people's case and jump down their throats out in public. I go out in public trying to teach. I've said this. I said it to Fred the other day. Learn everything you can about any given thing, and you're going to be the authority in that area, and people will follow you. Don't just say, let's get together and have a Bible study. Let me tell you something. We've got over 3,000 messages. This is the 3,083rd message that we've got. And if you watch, I have put 58 years in studying the Bible. And no small amount of time. And if you watch the DVDs and learn what's on the DVDs, most of you don't watch them. If you would, you'll learn. And if you learn, when I'm dead and gone, you'll be strong enough to keep standing. When I was in real estate, the reason I did so well, I learned everything I could about real estate. I called HUD every day. I would learn all the adjustable rate mortgages and the caps on the 245s, and I just learned everything that was there. And if I walked into an agency, anybody could say, what's the discounts on such and such? I just pop it right to them. When you know everything about a given subject, you become in demand. That's why I tell young people, learn, 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 learn. And I tell the people here, learn. You say, this is all so much. How many times will I say these things in a year? 1,000? If you'll learn them, I've had some of you with me, and somebody walks up to me and says, what does that mean on your shirt? Well, so first of all, let me explain this to you. And I get real gentle with them. And if they don't want to hear it, I say, well, excuse me. I walk away. I go out in public if you celebrate Christmas, you're probably going to hell. I don't do that. And I don't jump on them with Christmas and predestination to start with. I usually talk about a daily cross, prayer. I'll talk about self-denial. And that's something they can't deny. I'll tell them, if you don't bear your cross and follow me, you can't be my disciple. I told Mary's nephew that the other day. I said, do you know what a daily cross is? He's 55 years old. He's got his own business. I said, do you know what a daily cross is? He went. I said, then you don't know where to get one, do you? He went. I said, you have to have one in order to go to heaven. I didn't say that. Jesus said that. I'd rather tell somebody that than I had Christmas, because, boy, that convicts their heart fast. And that's something they can't deny. Tell them about repent. Tell them what God's doing in your life. And that takes some understanding how to do that. Now, so he's saying, charity is what builds up the house of God. Just having the knowledge of Greek words and being able to spew it out to people, if you don't have a compassion when you talk to people, you're a sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. Now let's go back to chapter 14. Sometimes I have to repeat a lot of things, but I know most of you have already got it. Now verse 1, chapter 14. Follow after charity. Remember, Corinth. Here's Greece here. There's a little land bridge that goes out to what they call the Peloponnesus. This thing that looks like a hand there. That's the Peloponnesus. Peloponnesus. P-O-L-L-E. P-O-L-E-N. Peloponnesus, I think. I'm not sure. But it's called the Peloponnesus. That's that little thing shaped like a hand. There's a land bridge that goes out there. And right at the end of the land bridge, as you hit the Peloponnesus, on the northwestern side is the city of Corinth. The city of Corinth was the merchandising capital of the world. Sailors come through there. Just dozens and dozens and dozens of dialects, Spanish dialects, French dialects, all kinds of glossa and languages throughout the city. Paul is telling people, don't come in the church spewing out your glossa without somebody interpreting. He's not talking about Pentecostalism. Let's read it. Follow after charity and desire spiritual gifts, but rather that ye may prophesy. It doesn't mean speak. It don't mean God's going to come upon you prophetia. It means to speak for another. Speak God's word for God. Speak for God. What we are, we're God's spokesman. That's what we are. And what is it we speak? The word of God. Yes, walk after charity. Yes, desire the spiritual gifts. You can put chapter 12 right up beside spiritual gifts. That's chapter 12. Charity is, you can put take a little arrow and point it to charity and put chapter 13. But that you prophesy, that you speak the word of God. For he that speaketh in an unknown tongue. You got to remember, they're coming into the church there at Corinth. Notice that the word unknown is in italics. It's not in the text. It's saying, he that speaks in a glossa, in a foreign language, you're coming into the church. Notice what it says. Notice what it says. The man who speaks in a foreign language doesn't talk to men, and you're supposed to be in the church to talk to men. Now, Pentecostals will read this and think this is a commendation. There's not one word of commendation throughout the book of 1 Corinthians. None. When you get into 2 Corinthians, they've kind of repented, started to come along the way a little bit. They're judgmental. They're a baby church. They're apostate. They're just trying to learn to grow. And they're fighting and fussing and arguing all the time about who their leader is. Mine's Apollos. I follow Paul. I follow Jesus. Oh, yeah? And they're fussing all the time. They're in the 3rd chapter of this book. He that speaketh in a tongue, a glossa, speaketh not unto men, but unto God. And no man understands what he's talking about in the church. Now, let me put it in those kind of tones. He said, don't stand up and say things in Spanish or French or whatever. Mike speaks German, but if he comes out here and starts talking to y'all in German, I'm going to have some of y'all drag him outside the church. And many of you speak Spanish. Don't get up here and start talking in Spanish. Some of us don't know what you're talking about. Howbeit, in the Spirit he speaketh mysteries. That's not a commendation. That's a condemnation. And notice what it says in the next verse. But he that prophesieth speaketh unto men to edification. What is it that edifies and builds up the house of God? That word edification is the same word in 1 Corinthians 8:1 that charity edifies. He's saying the person is edifying when he's talking truth that can be understood in a congregation. And you know what? These preachers in America are speaking in an unknown tongue because people don't have any idea what they're talking about. Then he says, he that prophesieth speaketh unto men to edification, exhortation, and comfort. But notice what he says in verse 4. This is a condemnation. This is not a commendation. It's condemning them. He that speaketh in an unknown tongue edifies himself. He builds up himself, and the Bible never, ever tells a man to build up himself, but crucify himself and build up his neighbor. Isn't that what the Bible teaches? Pentecostals will read it and say, see, you're supposed to build up yourself in front of everybody. No, you're not. He's condemning them here. He that speaketh in an unknown tongue edifieth himself, but he that prophesies and preaches the word of God edifies the church, and that's what walking in agape does. Isn't it? I would that you all spake with glossa, foreign languages, so you could talk to all these sailors coming into the church, all these merchants from all over the world. This was the hub of society in the civilized world that they called civilized. Of all the world, everything met at Corinth. But rather that you prophesy, for greater is he that prophesies than he that speaks with glossa, unless he interprets what's being said. It doesn't sound like he's talking about a Pentecostal tongue here, does it? Let me give you the word interpret. D-I-E-R. D-I-E-R. M-E-N-E-U-O. It means to explain thoroughly. Don't speak in a foreign language unless you can explain thoroughly what is being said. That means to explain without any kind of confusion. Unless he can explain thoroughly, that the church may receive edifying. Not that self may receive edifying, like he said in verse 4. Self is not to be edified. You speak in a language that nobody understands, like the preachers in America do, and nobody's being edified, are they? Now, brethren, if I come unto you speaking with glossa, not Pentecostal tongues, with foreign languages, what shall I profit you, except I shall speak to you either by revelation, apocalypsis, unless I speak to you by apocalypsis. That's the word. Comes from apo and calypto. Apo means off with, and somebody can say it, I think, cover. It means to take the cover off. Revelation has the basic same meaning as truth. Truth is the word aletheia, A-L-E-T-H-E-I-A. It comes from the word lanthano, meaning to lie hid or conceal. Lie hid or conceal. Conceal, when you place the alpha in front of the word, it negates the word, translates truth. It means no hiding, taking the cover off. Reveal and truth are basically the same meaning. They're synonyms. Whatever that is. Two words that have the same meaning. Now, he says, unless I speak to you by taking the cover off, or by knowledge, or by prophesying, telling the truth, or by doctrine. Didake. Instruction. You don't give instruction going shanda la manda la shua shaka la maya, do you? I mean, anybody can talk in that kind of gibberish, can't they? Just start saying, the Pentecostals will take you back in a room and start saying, say, tayi mabota, tayi mabota, tayi mabota. Say it over and over. They'll say, keep on saying it till your tongue lets go, won't they? That is an ungodly, false doctrine. And I've had Pentecostals call me and say, you're blaspheming God. No, you're blaspheming God. Blapto, phime, means to hinder the truth. I don't like Pentecostalism. It's false doctrine. And the world is covered in it. Even things without life-giving sound. Then Paul says, let's get this thing down to definition. Whether pipe or harp, except they give a distinction, diastole, D-I-A-S-T-O-L-E. Unless they give a distinction, a variation, or a difference in sounds. Or even things without life-giving sound, whether pipe or harp, except they have a distinction in sounds, how shall it know what is being piped or harped? How are people going to know what you're saying if you're jabbering in something they can't understand? Or if you're preaching like these preachers in these churches with no definition and no understanding of the Bible? For if the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to battle? The trumpet going into battle is supposed to be going da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, I liked Harry James when I was a little kid in the 40s. And I really loved that old song. It reminds me of World War II. And Kitty Callan was singing, kiss me once, and kiss me twice, and kiss me once again. And Harry James is praying, da-da-da-da-da-da. Now, if you play, it's been a long, long time, people are not going to charge in the battle, are you? No, I don't think so. And you play taps when you go to bed, and you play reveille in the morning when you get up. Don't you? How are you going to know what to do? If they play taps in the morning, you say, oh, then they want me to sleep today. You go back and go to bed. He's talking about being clear about what's being said. That's why we define words. Do I believe America knows word definitions? No, I don't even believe they know the English definition of words. Do you, English teacher? Huh? Do you believe they know the definitions? No, I don't believe it. I found out they don't know. Preachers are ignorant. Then let's go on here. How is it going to know what's being piped or harped? For if the trumpet give an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself to battle? So likewise ye, except ye utter by the tongue words easy to be understood. Don't sound like Pentecostalism, does it? How shall it be known what is spoken? For ye shall speak into the air. You just talk into the air. Nobody knows what you're even talking about. There are, it may be, so many kinds of phones. Phone. Voices. We get our word phone from that. It's phone. There are so many kinds of voices. Ring, ring, answer the voice. That's what you're saying. There's so many kinds of voices in the world, and none of them is without signification. Now, some of you speak Spanish. I hear you talking Spanish to one another, and you know what's being said, but I don't. I know como está usted. I took Spanish one day, but there was no great need for Spanish in 1954 in Texas, so I quit. I wish I had gone through with it now. Therefore, if I know not the meaning of the phone, voice, I shall be unto him that speaketh a barbarian. Do you think Paul is commending people for not speaking in a clear, concise, and precise language so people could understand? He says you sound like a bunch of barbarians, Pentecostals. And he that speaketh shall be a barbarian unto me. Even so ye, for as much as ye are zealous of spiritual gifts, from the 12th chapter. Notice he keeps referring back to the 12th and back to the 13th chapter, to agape. Seek that ye may excel to the edifying. What did he say? The man that speaks in an unknown tongue up there in verse 4, he edifies himself. What he's saying here in verse 12, don't edify yourself, build up the church. And how does you edify the church? By walking in the commandments of God and preaching truth, where it can be understood. That's not Pentecostalism, is it? Wherefore let him that speaketh in a glossa, if you're in the church, you have, first of all, he says, pray that he may interpret. You can't interpret unless you know that other tongue, or unless God's gifted you as one of the apostles to interpret that language. And if there's somebody in the church, don't ever do it unless you know what's going on here. He says, don't anybody come in here speaking Spanish unless there's somebody that can interpret from Spanish to the dialect of this church. Don't come in here doing that. It's not that Pentecostal stuff. For if I pray in a glossa, my spirit prayeth, my pneuma, my breath prayeth, but my understanding is unfruitful. He's not saying, I don't understand what I'm praying for. First of all, prayer, proseuchomai, means to bow to the will of God, doesn't it? If I pray, proseuche, pros, meaning toward, euche, meaning to will, towards the will of God. If I bow to the will of God in tongues, and I don't know what I'm saying, how can I be bowing to the will of God? He's saying, For if I pray in a glossa, foreign language, in my understanding, what my is a possessive pronoun, what I understand doesn't bear fruit with the people. It doesn't have any fruit of the Spirit with the people. That's what he's saying. He's not saying, I don't understand what I'm saying. My understanding is unfruitful to me. That's not what he's saying. He says it is my understanding. Doesn't he say that? It's what I understand. My understanding, he says, my understanding is unfruitful if I don't pray in a language where everybody knows what I'm praying about. It's not going to bear fruit among the people. He's not saying I don't understand my understanding. That's kind of dumb, isn't it? It's my understanding doesn't bear fruit with the people. What is it then? I will pray with the Spirit. The Spirit is the truth. The Word of God is the truth. I will pray with the Word of God. And I will pray with understanding also. He's not talking about so I can understand. I'm going to pray so the people can understand. This whole chapter is about don't do anything in the church that is confusing, isn't it? I will sing with the Spirit. I will sing with understanding also. Else when thou shalt bless with the Spirit, how shall he that occupieth the room of the unlearned idiotes? We get a word idiot from that. Unlearned. Idiotes. That's the word unlearned. Our word idiot comes from that. It means unlearned. How can the unlearned say amen when I am praying when they have no idea what I'm saying? At thy giving of thanks, seeing he understandeth not what's being said. This whole chapter is about be clear in the church, define the words, interpret. When you hear these preachers preaching these flowery messages, God is wonderful, He's in the sky and He's with the world, and we're so thankful this morning that God is here with us, and you know, God wants you to have a richer life in Jesus, and I love to talk in circles for about 45 minutes. Would somebody please bring your nail and hammer up here and nail my foot to the floor so I can just talk in circles? And do you know they're speaking in a glossa? Nobody understands what they're... You walk away and say, what did the preacher preach about? I don't know, but it was good. I can listen to those guys, and if you'll take notes, I have preached more Greek words than any Baptist church in America in the last 50 years in this message. That's not counting tonight, and that's not counting next Wednesday and next Sunday. The reason preachers don't know is they are lazy bums. Now, where was I? 17. For thou verily givest thanks well, but the other is not edified. He says you're not edified if I don't speak in a language that's understood. You're not built up. Don't edify yourself. The man that speaks in an unknown tongue, notice he starts off the chapter and says, if you speak in an unknown tongue, you're not edifying anybody but yourself. You're lifting up yourself. Stop that. Paul is tough on these people, isn't he? I thank my God that I speak with glossa, foreign languages, not Pentecostal tongues. Paul was the most educated of all the apostles. He sat at the feet of Gamaliel. He said, I was educated. I was a Pharisee. I have all this education. And he said, I speak with more glossa in the world than any of you. But he said, that's not what I'm here for. He says, I thank God I spake with glossa more than you all, yet in the church I had rather speak 5 words with my understanding, with me being able to understand, that by my voice I might teach others also, than 10,000 words in an unknown glossa. Does that sound like he's commending the glossas? No. He's condemning anybody comes in the church and the church can't understand. Not just the people here, but these preachers, you don't have any idea. They read some verses and they talk in a circle, no definition. It's just all a feel-good gospel. No daily cross, no death to self, no self-denial, no dying daily, no daily cross, no suffering for righteousness' sake, no tribulation, no fiery trials, and that's required for every believer. Now, then he says, brethren, be not children in understanding. Don't understand like children. They don't understand. Howbeit in malice be children. Don't fight with each other here in the church over tongues or anything else. How the children hold things against each other. Now, I said it the other day. When Christopher and Jonathan, my two grandsons, get together and fight, and they do it often. One's 5 and one's 6. They don't. What?
He said, that's me.
That's me. That's it. He's back there. That's me. They're back there on the back. When they fight, they don't. 30 minutes later, you hit me a while ago. They don't do that. They just start playing again. In malice, that's what they do. Don't you, Christopher, Jonathan? Yep, they do. Okay, whatever you said. All right, where was I? In the law it is written, with men of other tongues and other lips, other glossa, will I speak unto this people, and for all that will they not hear me, saith the Lord. So, where's that spoken from? That's quoted from Isaiah, the 28th chapter. Do you think we need to look at that? I guess we do. Let's go to Isaiah 28. And I'm not through with this. How much time do I have, Mike? 9 minutes. I ain't going to have time to get through this. All right. Look here in Isaiah. Isaiah 28 chapter. If you watch these DVDs, I've got so much more to go on this. Y'all just can't believe where we're going with this. Don't just say, I know tongues is foreign language, and I have people call me, I know it's foreign language. Well, there's a whole story to it, a picture to it. I've been on this subject for about 5 or 6 weeks on Sunday morning. It's more than, I know it's foreign languages. There's a story to it. It begins back in Genesis 11. Then it continues in Exodus, where you got the 3 feasts where all the males have to come back to. And then you get up into all the Pentecost and all the Passovers, and all the males are coming back. And after Israel is scattered, they're all speaking all these different glossa and dialects. Look here. So here's the thing. God says, I'm going to talk to Israel with these glossa. With men of other tongues and other lips will I speak unto this people. You cannot teach about glossa without going here. All right. Let me see what I'm looking for. Okay, look here. He says here in the 28th chapter, he's talking about in the 28th chapter. I'm going to have to come back and go through the whole 28th chapter. He is talking about, gosh, I was going to read through the whole thing. He talks about the destruction of Israel being with mighty waters overflowing. God speaks in Isaiah 8 and 7 about the Assyrians coming in as a great flood that overflows Israel. Then he says down here in verse 5, in that day when Assyria overflows Israel, the Assyrian chariots are going to come in and carry northern Israel captive, and that happens over there in 2 Kings, the 17th chapter. That's what this is talking about, and this is about the men of other tongues and other lips. And he says, in that day shall the Lord of hosts be for a crown of glory and for a diadem of beauty unto the residue of the people, and for a spirit of judgment to him that sitteth in judgment, and for strength to them that turn the battle to the gate. But they also have erred through wine and through strong drink. He's not talking about booze. He's talking about spiritual drunkenness, because he says in verse 1 of chapter 28, woe be to the crown of pride to the drunkards of Ephraim. That's northern Israel. And northern Israel mixes their beliefs with the Assyrians and mixes their beliefs with the daughter of Ethbaal, Jezebel, when she marries Ahab, king of northern Israel. And they come up with a drunken elixir, which is The spiritual drunkenness, that's what this is talking about. If I had time, we'd go through it thoroughly. And then he says, and through strong drink are out of the way, the priest and the prophet have erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up of wine. He's not talking about literal booze. He's talking about spiritual drunkenness. Takes a mixed elixir to make a spiritual drunken drink. And they had mixed truth with a lie, hadn't they? They are out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumbled in judgment. For all the tables, the table of the Lord was the altar of the Lord in front of the east gate of the temple. Their tables are full of vomit and filthiness. They're offering lame lambs to God. That's what Malachi, the first chapter, says. He says, offer this to the government. Tell the government you only give them $100 when you owe them $5,000 in taxes. He says, tell the government that. You offer God lame sacrifice, I'm sick of it. Then he says, so that there is no place clean in Israel. Whom shall God teach knowledge? How's he going to teach knowledge? He'll tell you how. And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. He says, when you start growing up and maturing, he says, that's who I'll teach. You can't be taught while you're still at the mother's breast. You're too young. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little and there a little. And then he tells you what he means by line upon line, precept upon precept. He's not talking about that goofy woman from Chattanooga, what's her name? Precept classes. He's talking about the Assyrian war chariots coming in and them popping the whip and cutting Israel down with their iron chariots with those scythes on the wheels and just ripping Israel up. He said that'll be line upon line. That'll be precept upon precept. And he says it in the next verse. For with men of stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to this people, and for all this they will not hear. He's talking about the Assyrians coming in. The word stammering is the word la'eg. Let me tell you about this word. It means a foreign language. It means a foreign language. It means a glossa. It'd be the Old Testament word for glossa. He says, with men of other lips, that's what he said there in the 14th chapter, men of other lips and other tongues will I speak to Israel. He says, it's like telling your kid, you want to listen to me? I'll tell you what, you'll listen to this belt. You ever said that? You'll listen to this belt. God says, you won't listen to me for 500 years? I've got a belt. I've got a razor strap. It's called the Assyrian kings, and I'll bring them in, and they'll cut you down. Here's what this word laeg means. Let me read to you out of a commentary. With stammering lips and with another tongue, the Assyrian language. You noticed in the back of your concordance it says Chaldee, Hebrew Chaldee dictionary. The Chaldean language was a Hebrew language. That was a Babylonian or an Assyrian language. It was a dialect, but just because you could understand Hebrew, it didn't mean you could understand that. And then he says, with stammering lips and another tongue, the Assyrian language, though a Semitic idiom nearly allied to the Hebrew, was sufficiently different to sound in the ears of the Jews like his own tongue, mispronounced and barbarized. What he's saying, as those Assyrian chariots will come in, it sounded like the stuttering and the stammering of the Hebrew, and they're whipping them with whips. God says, this is how I'll speak to Israel, and they won't listen to me. And then the next verse there in 1 Corinthians 14 says, wherefore, tongues are for a sign, not to them that believe, but to them that believe not. And these Assyrians, they were whipping an Israel that believed not with other glossa. That's what they're doing. That's what this is talking about right here. And this whole chapter talks about an overflowing scourge coming into Israel because they made a contract with hell. And it's talking about Tophet, where they offered their children in the fire. Those of you that's been here as I go through the history of Israel, you can see and know what this whole chapter is about. The Assyrians coming in to carry northern Israel away into captivity. That's the men of other tongues and other lips. Well, I talk to this people and they won't listen to me. From now on, he says, tongues are for a sign, not to them that believe, to them that believe not. And the only sign to the unbeliever is the resurrection. And you have to be preaching the resurrection, which is the gospel, when the tongues were spoken. And when these people left Israel and went back to their various lands, they went back and preached the gospel of the resurrection to the all flesh of the world. That's what it's talking about. It's not talking about Pentecostalism. That is the biggest bunch of baloney that's going on out there. I'm out of time. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for your word and for truth. Lord, sometimes I don't know how to get all this over to people. I pray you'll unravel it in our minds so we can see all of this truth. You want us to know your truth in your word. God will praise you for all things. I pray for the church that they'll grow and they'll mature and walk in your commandments, walk in the agape. Lord, and we'll praise you for all things. Let us edify the church and not ourselves. And we'll give you praise in Christ's name. Amen. At least we'll know what the tongues are about before it's over, won't we? Hey, Brother John. That's me.
I wanted to talk to you with Victor over here since he's outside. I've offered him a job.
He can't get back and forth to it.
He can ride a bus.
To where?
Just now.
Well, if he can come out there, we can get
He
him.
can also stay at the mission.
Well, getting back and forth is really hard for him.
Planted my garden too. I made a strawberry patch this year again. I built it again. We planted 30 plants. Then planted the garden. I dug trenches this deep in between the rows and made a line. So when it rains, it'll hold the water and it'll hold the root. And I did all Working inside helps me. I love working wood and really good. I went into it. When y'all coming back?
He said the this is weighing out. He does want to, he just real frustrated about I'm trying to get some marriage. At my age, I didn't see him leave. Yeah, he just, I didn't think, I didn't even know he hadn't got coffee. He didn't just jump in.
What you got?
I don't see you got your
There's something wrong with his mind. He's got his lips there. He's got a disorder. And I told him, I said,
He's in the computer lab.
he said, I'm feeling in my neck. He said, it's what's in my neck and in the back of my stomach. I think he's a neurological problem. And I want to get him to a doctor, but I need to get some insurance. He's applied for insurance if he needs. That's not hard.
That definitely good part.
My dad was in college and in the church. And he just sat there.
Yeah, I'm not.
It had nothing to do with what they're saying. That's it.
And as I was going through the definition, I was smart enough to understand that they were just not.
You go to a doctor's office and you're young, I'm going to say, adrenaline rush, and you'll think something's happening to me.
And I told my wife, and my wife spoke to me.
What's he gonna pay?
That's what he was speaking to.
Yeah, but that's.
I can babble.
Don't let him take the video.
I won't. Make sure you tell Jim. Buy Jenny for me so he know he's got some more.
Yeah, they all made funny sounds.
It's semantic redefinition. It's basically just redividing words. However you want it to be. That's what all calls do. All calls semantic redefinition.
If you leave that definition, you can't leave the definition.
And nobody ever gave me definition.
That's it.
No one ever said this. Now, the Bible allows me to search for it. And from the dictionary,
But you need to search it through a 3C.
Well, these guys, they so good. Oh, I know it is. I just have to get access to it. I was a construction company, and the trials I was a lot of times.
We got everybody.
When I get into trouble, I tend to move. Okay, if I go somewhere else, I won't have to deal with this.
Wonderful.
He would know about the Greek dictionary on the
I've got a program, I don't have a good memory, so I put it on the computer so I have to keep it.
Well, when
I'll be 7.
he needs the program for the Greek.
Oh,
It's
really?
going to be one, well, it's for a Kindle, because that's what he's got.
Well, now that's what my wife has.
Oh, you've got, okay, so
She's
you've
got a new. She's got a new. But if you got a computer home, I got some programs for you. Some of them free. They'll knock your head off. And they break down words. For today, Jim said something about one. Well, I go down and it translates all the levels. And guess what the first level is? Effervescence. Has nothing to do with it. It's blowing up your feelings. Right, Jim? It has nothing to do with wine. Remember when you were talking about wine? You're talking about wine. You're not talking about the alcohol. The first thing was effervescence. Blowing up, feeling excited, and all this other stuff. In other words, blowing up.
You're a guy who seems like he feels excited. I said you're a guy who seems like he feels excited. It's a joke. You just the way you speak. I said you're a guy who seems like you feel excited very often. The way you speak is very effortless.
Yeah. And this is what I'm trying to say. Does he know
Put it in there so we don't make a lump in my pocket.
Jim?
Yes.
Yeah. We had a little mini lesson, and I'm still would like to sit down. Also, there's a number of reasons that I like. So besides that you ask me to help teach them, I'm also coming to a point where people are starting to ask me to help teach them. Because I don't necessarily
The more you
have.
learn about this, you can learn quick. The more you learn.
And it's amazing. I'll think I've got it good in my head.
Dude,
I'm trying to get some kids and I realize it's a pretty big gap. So I need to get going.
You learn fast.
that's beautiful there.
Yeah, and that's what I realized there's something like
There's so much.
Rain Man or a diesel or what?
Coleman.
Sailboat.
Okay. I need to say, I was supposed to say, okay, I'll get up now.
Love that stuff.
and it's all matters
I
of
know, I can sell it.
God has
They
given
can't
us. He's
hear.
given us
They
the
can't.
Was it a trawler?
All they can do is batting out a bunch of words. You're running nuts. You're running But that's the world.
Hydraulic line. Like you're upstream 60 road.
How are you doing there?
Oh, you are the hell's catch.
Just out your bag, as they used to say in the 60s. Is that your bag? Is that your thing? You remember they used to, that was the people say, is that your bag, man? That's your bag. That's your thing. Well, I had this young Pentecostal singer that did this in the morning. He got up and he was real good. Heard his voice when he just got up and let the guys give their testimony. He said,
So I grew up.
I just got to learn this morning, Jesus says it's your bag, I didn't teach it's your bag.
And that one was right
So like, they're being hard,
Give me a call.
the keyboard man.
I got up to a 50-foot grand panties. It was a hall number 58. And boy, I tell you, if I got that water in there, down in the build I'm talking about it's full Ford Lehman 120 diesels. And just sip 1,000 gallons of diesel. I should go for months. And I go to, I probably Catalina 120 times. I have never been
I had bat wings on it that were
Oh, okay.
at least 3 feet.
No.
Stabilized?
Yeah.
Yeah, the bat wings.
Wait, was this a sailboat?
No, this was a great big yacht.
Trawler.
Ocean-worthy yacht,
How big?
37 feet.
Only 37. Wow, you're going.
Yeah, but you'd be surprised. 50-footer, I'm telling you, when you come up like this, and then you level to the next,
You don't take them square. You take them at an angle.
and then you come down and pray.
No, you just steer down it.
Yeah.
As soon as you come up, you kind of cut the acid out of it and let it steer down.
And make sure your props don't go crazy because water sometimes.
Just for a second. Yeah, and it's not always that big. Not always that
It's
big.
on the
I
way.
mean, I could take 12 foot.
Yeah, that's no problem. I took some 30s.
Oh yeah, those
In a
are
Sea Ray
Those
26.
are huge. Oh, in a little boat too.
I was making a deal with right. Sea Ray 26.
You're skipping off the top going, Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, when the wave is long,
It was a beautiful day.
taller than your boat is long.
Yeah.
That's when it gets scary.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I looked at a hill, and I just go, vroom, and I'd come off, and I'd know where my props got, and try to get there, and I'd go full reverse. I had 4 of them. It was a beautiful day off of Redondo Beach, down near the airport in LA. Now, I heard where they came from, and of course, there's things at 12, which is 4, 5, 6, 7, and then there's waves 10, 11, and 12. Right? And then these were like every 72 or something like that. And it was some sort of storm. And I saw this wall coming down. What? And when I sailed, I always sailed by myself a lot. So I put a harness on. And this guy was a truck driver, was a buddy of mine. He left his wife and I left my daughter back to take cab when he got away from me down the beach. And he was going to be a man there. This over, I was slipping. Pete, for heaven's sakes, go, no. He had to lay in a
I had
bath
a lot
of
of,
hot water.
friends who just go green in the hills and they gotta lay down. And as soon as they lay down, they gotta get sick.
And I'm sitting there howling like a cowboy. I was having a wonderful time. We're not right. You have to be not right.
Different. My friends go all the time.
Angle.
A little off. Not quite.
Dwayne hasn't even told you how he used to play with Alice Cooper.
Who?
Don't tell them that. Don't tell them
Played
that.
with? I mean,
Yeah, he wrote and played in his band.
oh, no kidding. Oh my God, that's glad to meet you. And I got your phone.
I've been trying to call it cool. He's a PK. He's a pastor's kid. And his wife's a pastor kid. Figures. And his father became, his parents became good friends of mine because they go to Phoenix. My dad had a small construction company in Syracuse. Well, you don't do any construction in the wintertime. So they go up to Phoenix. One of Coop is probably one of the nicest people I've ever met. Brilliant. So I want to get the message to him. I'm just trying to find it.
I'd love to help you.
Yeah,
For the opportunity to meet.
but he's
Alex
been
Cooper.
clean and sober for 17 years. Anything for him to Groucho Marx, Vincent Price, George Burns, and him were to get together once a month. And once a year to play poker.
Oh, man, to be a fly on that one.
You don't play poker against Alice Cooper, Groucho Marx. So they clean out Vincent Price and George Burns. And, you know, it'd be a friendly game of 10,000, you know. And what, you know what Coop would do? When we got a little short on money, or a tour didn't do too well, he played the sound band, and then he played the light band, and make enough money so he didn't have to pay him three gigs. Smart man.
That's okay.
Nice meeting you, brother.
Good to meet you.
Okay? And I'll show you the programs in summer free. And what I got is like $1,800. But it breaks down, if you finish that program, it's like what Jim said, it's pretty much, it's like going to a seminary, except half the program is just done. School. It's just, you take that part and you throw it away. Well, when it breaks down the Bible, you got choice of Bibles, you got charts, you got libraries.
Well, what I'm looking for right now, not a Bible, what I'm looking for right now is a dictionary that will give me, if I put in American word, it'll give me the definition, what it looks like in
What I
English.
see today,
You need an intro to your Bible and a Strong's
what would a total breakdown of each one?
An intro into your Bible has
Yes,
exact,
start
and then
that.
it has basically the
I'll talk to you guys
exact-
later. Listen to him, and a good
Yeah, I've
chorus.
had that.
Because this will be a lot cheaper. I mean, so it's the intro into your Bible. I think he's got one up here. But an intro into your Bible.
What I doing?
An intro into your Bible basically have the Hebrew and then the
Interlinear Greek English.
That entertainer comes back.
So it's gonna have three or exact translation of this, that one. I mean, you can't trust that. But then on the side, it'll have the King James version. Usually it'll have the King James. What you want to do is you want to get one that's got the King James version and the you want to make sure that it's working from Texas reception.
Oh, boy.
You talked about it a little bit today.
Because there's more definitely, there's more versions today than just the Texas reception and the West Coast report.
Celtic myth and magic.
Yeah, well, there are no such things as demons. Demon means to be possessed with demons. Demons is all about distributing fortunes. It's all about being filled with self.
Yeah.
Because it says the heart is wicked above all things, who can know it? So if the heart's wicked above all things, then, I mean, what are these magical unclean spirits? But an unclean spirit is the same thing as a demon, same thing as a fairy, same thing as a genie, same thing as a familiar spirit and a totem. It's all different ways of referring to the same thing.
All right.
So that's why Jim has studied Celtic fairies and spirits, and because just to be able to relate all that.
And it's subsided now. Now that I got it moved around. It's subsided. Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's faith healing.
Well,
There's also no such thing as faith healing.
yeah, that would really upset Pastor.